for my interview, I have here Jake Shapiro. Can you introduce yourself a little more?
My name is Jake Shapiro. I am a reporter at the Denver Post, and I also work at Buff Stampede as a Buffs beat writer, where I've covered the CU men's basketball team for almost a decade, and I am also a sports media professor at the University of Colorado at Boulder.
Yeah, so huge credentials, big time. But I wanted to get into asking some questions. So right off the bat, what do you think it means to have a huge presence of fans at a win game?
In terms of how it impacts the media, or
just everything, like the confidence of the players and like how that kind of communicates like a positive communication level.
I think at the college level, fans do make some sort of a difference, and the more fans, the better. But generally speaking, I think we largely overestimate how much fans actually have an impact on sporting events. I think for the most part, at least at the professional level, athletes have one level that they perform at. And whether a fan says some smack talk to them or fans are really cheering loudly, I don't know that it actually ultimately ends up affecting them all that much. I do know if the crowd is extremely loud, it may get into their ear a little bit in terms of a buzz, like you think about a false start in the NFL, or if you think about a couple fans in there where you can hear everything, where, some of maybe the CU volleyball games you go to where there's not many people at, and you can hear individual people talking, and that will bother people because they can hear maybe mean things that are being said.
Yeah, it's more pronounced in a way.
Yeah, it's more pronounced, it's more individual, but, my experience at CU is one of the best basketball schools in terms of a fan base in the Pac-12. And you can see when people come in here, they know from the get-go, the players, that this is going to be a big-time college basketball game. I think the altitude probably has a bigger effect on the style of play and the level of play on the visiting team than the fan base itself. But I do think that, there is something to relating to your fellow students. And you look at a guy like Evan Batty, who's always talking with the crowd, who wants to sing the fight song after the game with the crowd. It means something to him, obviously, when there's a fan base there. Whereas maybe at the NBA level, they're all nameless and faceless besides maybe a couple season ticket holders in your family.
Exactly. So really getting more on top of that, the ways in which players are on the road, very hostile environments, how do you think this affects their ability to communicate with their coaches and teammates during the game?
Well, most teams have hand signals and body gestures for play calls. It's not necessarily saying, triangle or floppy or motion offense. They'll have, a finger gesture where they wave their finger around while they're saying motion. That's what Tad Boyle does to run their motion offense. So it impacts them right there because they already have to have different gestures because they know their players might not be able to hear them. Now, in terms of communication, if you're talking about what strategically they're doing on a defensive possession, they should know before they break the huddle or when they go out there if they're switching pick and rolls or if they're hedging pick and rolls or what they're doing. Now, it does help when you're in game to say, I got this, Dallas, I've got this, Evan, or you got that, let's switch here. And the louder the crowd noise is, ultimately the less effective that communication is going to be. But I do think there is a level of the crowd noise helping people and hurting people. And you look at this actually at CU's free throw shooting numbers. Last year with no fans, CU almost broke the college record for free throw shooting in a single season by any college in NCAA history. This year, their free throw numbers and all the guys who returned took a big step back in their free throw shooting. So, just being at the free throw line, which is the least communication thing that happens in basketball because it's just individual versus hoop, the fans are having some sort of impact there.
Exactly. So going off of that, too, you would pretty much say that, motions like that, the nonverbal aspects of communication are pretty huge in the game of basketball?
Yeah, and there's different signs, and I grew up playing baseball at a pretty high level, and you can tell based on, playing with a guy for so long where they like to catch the ball, and maybe they'll say, they'll tap their chest right before the possession starts, or they'll tap their knee, and it'll be a gesture between teammates to say, throw that at my knee, throw that at my chest next time. But you look at, great NBA players in the past like Paul Gasol. He used to communicate with his teammates in Spanish or Italian at times because other people on the floor would not know what they were talking about. So they could straight up say from teammate to teammate, this is exactly the play we're going to run. and no one else on the floor could understand it because they did not speak that language. So there is a language within sports, and I find this fascinating in soccer, which I cover also in the Colorado Rapids. Guys are speaking 8 or 9 different languages in America on the soccer pitch in MLS. And that language barrier from guy to guy can have massive effects on a team if your left back and your left wing can't communicate. So you'll see teams put 2 Brazilian guys that can speak Portuguese on the same side of the field.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So you've seen multitude of sports, and like, do you have any interactions like on a communication standpoint that have like stood out to you that you can think of right now that like are very vivid in like those like the descriptions? We can even go into like detail of like a very like nonverbal situation and more of like a strong kind of communication.
So a strong nonverbal one would be from my time covering the Colorado Rockies, and I won't reveal the player because this is a little inside, literally talking baseball.
Behind the scenes, okay.
Yeah, but players, there's a play in baseball called the hit and run, and it's very simple. When you're at the plate, the runner will steal second base, and your job is to try and hit it into the hole that was vacated either by the shortstop or the second base, who has to cover second base for that steal. So it opens up more of the defense. Specific players have specific signs. Let's say the coach calls a hit and run, he'll maybe tap his nose, tap his eye, and that'll be the hit and run sign. But players can indicate from the base runner to the batter, hey, I think I can steal this base, I'm going to go. And it could be something as simple as adjusting your cap, touching the bill of your cap, touching your chest. So the Rockies, one of their players, his motion for I think I can steal this base is he would put the toe of his foot on the base and lift it up like almost like a peacock or a bird, right? And it would be very subtle. Like that's a very subtle thing, just to put your toe on the base in an upwards motion right before he would be set to take his lead. Mm-hmm. And that would mean I think I can steal this base, I'm going to go on the next pitch. So that would be a nonverbal thing. And conversely, the defensive players on the field, they'll motion in their glove the second baseman to the shortstop who has the ball by opening or closing their mouth. So open mouth means I got it. Closed mouth means you've got it. So the shortstop and second base can know who's covering second base, and the hitter can be a little bit more confused where he's supposed to hit and run that ball and where the hole's going to be on the defensive side when they do that hit and run. So there's a lot of nonverbal communication. Baseball is one of the best sports for that nonverbal communication. Obviously, we see that with the catcher given, every play inside and out. Mm-hmm. But you think about a guy like Nikola Jokic. He'll be the type of guy that will literally tell you on the basketball floor, and you can watch this in Nuggets games, like, Aaron Gordon, go sit in that left corner. This ball is going to come to you. Mm-hmm. And everyone on the floor can hear it, including the defense. And then Nikola Jokic will wheel into the post. The double will come. Aaron Gordon somehow open, even though the defense knows it's coming to him. And Jokic will make that pass, and he'll be open. So there is all sorts of nonverbal and verbal communication happening nonstop in sports. And I think ultimately, obviously athletic ability and skill is unbelievable at that level. But the communication between parts and teammates is just as important, whether you're playing doubles in tennis or you're playing 11-on-11 football. And you think about this with Tom Brady the last few years and how high level of throws he's making to Rob Gronkowski. Everyone knew in that Super Bowl against Atlanta that ball was going to Rob Gronkowski at the end of the game. But through their repeated reps in the offseason and them communicating before the game and all offseason, hey, in this situation, I like it when you run 15 yards and then do this, or 15 yards and do that. Mm-hmm. They knew exactly where each other was going to be without communicating because they had communicated so much beforehand.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And then even going off of that, what do you think the presence, like, throughout the whole entire pandemic, like, kind of shifted without having, like, the ability with, like, fans in the stands, like, media to have, like, a really close attention to, like, these players? Like, how do you think that really changed up the game?
I used to have a really good relationships with athletes, and a lot of that has been gone away because every time I talk to an athlete now, they're in a press conference setting, a very sterile setting with a camera in front of them. I used to be able to walk up without my phone, without a recorder, and just talk to them in locker rooms. And obviously that's, a no-no until very recently here, face-to-face contact. So it's definitely impacted, I think, the media's ability to tell stories in a way that's very personable, but I also think some journalists have been very creative, like Matt Sullivan, who covers the Brooklyn Nets, who has done a very good job covering the Nets, and he actually connected with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant through this pandemic via social media, and they've become very close offline because of that connection. So I don't know that, I think the means of communication have very much changed, and obviously I'm preaching to the choir. Everyone knows the means of communication have changed. But ultimately, I think the high-level communicators have found ways to still get their message across. It's just about changing your message to the medium and the mode in which it's communicated. And, people will say the message is the medium. To a certain extent, yes, the message is the medium. You don't want to get broken up with over text. But when there is no face-to-face communication for 2 years, there's a more leniency to the understanding of, hey, I got this job over the phone instead of in person. And that's the same thing happening when, Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski are talking.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So just last question for you. I want to just really hear your take on, I know that you were a former student of CU. Can you remember a time that you find to be very interesting from as a student in the student section at CU compared to being a member of the media?
I used to lead the roller coaster and was a VP of the C unit when I was in college, which I'm not even sure you knew. So okay. I led the student section for years, and I saw people get kicked out for saying vulgar things. I saw people get arrested for doing things they shouldn't be doing. We said some really nasty things about Andy Enfield's wife at one point, who, was a Sports Illustrated model, swimsuit model, and we would do all sorts of different things to try and razzle the opponents. And, with the thing going on with not Simone Biles, excuse me, the thing going on with Naomi Osaka, right now, where she got offended very recently about a fan saying, "You suck," there needs to be obviously a conversation about what crosses the line. But some of my fondest memories in the student section, as someone who also empathizes very much with athletes, are us printing out basically a list of facts of ways that we could get under the skin of the opposing team. I've had some great experiences in the student section. I think watching a game in a student section in college is what it's all about. In fact, the reason I picked Colorado was because of the C unit. I thought that's one of the best places to watch college basketball in the country, and I want to go somewhere where I can watch college basketball. The places I applied to were Kansas, CU, Utah State, and Florida Gulf Coast, 4 of the best student sections in the country. So I think that, especially from my own experience, those things have a big impact on the culture and the tradition of a university. And you see this within the student section itself over the last 2 years, and how much the tradition has been lost because people have not been able to pass it down due to there no fans being in the stands last year. And some of the things the C unit used to do game in and game out have not been passed down. And there are new traditions starting, which are very cool as well.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Jake, for your time. Your insight was amazing to have. We spoke to Evan Batty earlier. We also got some more from fan interactions too as well. So it's awesome to have your information to help reinforce our observations in this project that we have. So thank you.
No problems. Go Buffs.